All right. Hi, everybody. This is Sarah Van Alstyne with the Oklahoma Occupational Therapy Association, and we have a special guest with us tonight. This is Paula Lewis.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, so we're trying something new tonight and doing a special interview with our guest, and then I'll have a few legislative updates for you too. So tonight we're talking about mental health and we're talking about the distinct value of occupational therapy in community leadership roles. And Paula Lewis is an expert in these areas, so we love having her with us here tonight. Can you just tell us a little bit about your career as an occupational therapist and then about specialty areas that you have, Paula?
Yeah, absolutely. So nobody's going to believe if I say I've only been an OT for a year, right? Just kidding. I graduated in 1994, so it makes me have been a therapist a long time, 25 years, 6 years. And I kind of started as a traveling therapist, honestly. When I got out, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so I did some traveling stints and acute care hospitals and long-term care facilities and um, kind of found modalities. That's when Sundance was teaching a lot of modality classes in long-term care. So I kind of got into that. And I was a golfer in college. And so when we landed in Albuquerque, I got a job at an outpatient clinic doing something called golf ability. So I would videotape, like back in the old days, like the can't hold him camera, someone's golf swing who was having pain. And then I would break it down into the biomechanics of it and help them figure out a way to get that tendonitis gone or whatever it was gone. So that's kind of my first like entrepreneur type thing that I did, just a contract with this clinic. Did that a couple years. Enjoyed New Mexico. My first niece was getting older and into kindergarten and kept wanting me to come to her plays, and I couldn't do it. And my nanny was getting a little bit older, and I'm the first grandkid, so I wanted to be home. So I moved back to Oklahoma City in 2000 and finished up my MBA through the University of Phoenix. Then did a little stint of management in a rehab company. Learned a lot. I mean, just learned a lot about the concept of how businesses work. And then opened my first outpatient clinic with a PT partner called Oklahoma Therapy Institute. And we grew that to three. And then healthcare reform wasn't awesome for adult outpatient clinics, but it was very needed. And I'm a huge supporter of healthcare reform. I think that, the patients are who needs to be the benefited from it, not the business owners. So sold one, closed one, and then closed another one. But always during that time, I was doing work injuries, back pain, chronic pain, manual therapy. That just was my specialty. That I taught all kinds of classes about it. Still love the mechanics of things. I still like the physics of how the body stands and how it works and where you can use leverage to help people, be able to perform their daily activities as pain-free and as quality as they can. But as I aged into my career, I really started needing to have a give back. I just had this feeling that, I'd been really blessed my whole life as an OT. I'm the first person to graduate from college in my family. And so really when I got my first paycheck as an OT, I was like, man, this is it. Like, I never thought I was going to get this. And so everything's kind of been a bonus since then. And so that's a pretty cool way to live when you're like, oh, wow, look at that. And meet just amazing people. So I just dug in. I adopted my first kiddo when I was 35. He's now in the Army. He's 19. Military police. I know, right? He's military police, which has its own funniness about that right now. But he was, a hard kid, but a sweet kid. But he was hard because he had had trauma before I got him at 4.5. And I made a lot of parenting mistakes. And then I found someone who told me the mistakes I was making. And so it really brought mental health. I'd always liked mental health in school. There just wasn't an avenue to do mental health as an OT when I got out, but it was always my favorite classes. And so then I found trauma-based, relational-based interventions for trauma and Halo, and that kind of started happening while I was wanting to do this give back, and I started coming to OKOTA and thinking, well, maybe I can help with this in our state organization or do something. I'd always done PTA stuff at schools. I laugh and say I started as the crossing guard at 22nd and Walker. That's how I started my volunteering at OKCPS, Oklahoma City Public Schools. And then met Liz Hilton, and we opened Quest Pediatric 5.5 years ago. It'll be 6 years ago this May.
Wow.
I'm not a pediatric expert by any shape or form, but I do love kids. I love, love, love kids. And Liz is an expert in pediatrics. I had the business side of it, and we merged beautifully together. And I've learned that really understanding just that trauma, that mental health side, has allowed me to work pretty succinctly with kids. And I can't think of a better way to have, probably going to end my career working with kids. Like every day, I don't even care if there's kids crying. It's like the greatest day. You walk in and see the cutest little individuals. I had one today that looked like he was like a professor dressed all up. I was like, what got into you today, Mr. Bree? And so, that's where I've ended up, as far as OT wise. And I love every minute of it. During that time, 5 years ago too, 5 years ago was a big time for me. I ran for the school board for Oklahoma City Public Schools. And then it was the largest school district in the state. Now we're the largest brick and mortar district in the state because Epic has grown. So I ran for that, and then I was there for a year, and then the chair position came open in Oklahoma City. The chair is the at-large position, so it's a citywide election. So I became the chair of Oklahoma City Public Schools Board of Education 4 years ago. And man, you talk about a steep learning curve. That's what I have to say. It was a steep learning curve. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm excited to be here and talk about advocacy. I think being an OT has really helped me in the role, from how you interact with people, how you mirror people when you're interviewing people or when you're listening to people. Like those skill sets from 25 years ago, I think carry me a long way.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's kind of where I've landed. Quest Pediatric Therapy and school board chair, and a mom of another one. I've got a 9-year-old too. So one's gone, one's
Don't
still home.
forget the younger one. He's got
Don't
it.
forget the baby. No.
Yeah. So when you decided to run for the school board, because you were already extremely busy being a mom and running a new business, what was one of those motivations for running for the school board? And did your experience as an occupational therapist give you a sense of, maybe I could do this? Or were you planning to use OT, or did you know how much it would cross over on the school board role?
Um, so really what it came down to is I had back then, when I first adopted my son, um, they hadn't had the science yet that PTSD mask as ADHD in kids.
Mhm.
And so I did everything I could possibly do that OT said, like, so you need arts and music. So I moved into the downtown area, got him into the only arts integrated school. And then I just found that as a parent, I was really having a hard time having a conversation with the teacher about what was happening with my son. And it wasn't their fault. It wasn't my fault. It's just that we didn't have a common language that could describe what Hunter was having a problem with. He was considered a non-reader in the 3rd grade. I mean, there was just things that were happening. And so I started getting more involved in his school because I thought, well, maybe if I'm there more, we'll be able to communicate. So during that time, I met who was currently the board, wanted to be a board member, Laura Massenot. And they were running, her and her group of friends were running on better nutrition in our schools. So she was the first campaign that I ever worked. So I went and knocked doors for her, and that's our first blow into this, and she won.
Yeah.
Well, 4 years later, we rode bicycles together all the time. And I said, man, when you quit doing that, I think I might be interested in that work. Like that seems like really good work. And she's like, all right. So she thought she was going to run again, and she ran, and she ended up deciding not to run. So I ran and unopposed that particular time, but it was really because I thought, there's just a missing piece in our schools. Like I felt like I'm a fairly intelligent person. I'm fairly easy to talk to, and I still cannot
Yeah.
connect these dots in Oklahoma City Public Schools, and it's not helping my kid. And so developmentally, like I was trying as an OT. And so then when I got on the board had some issues. I'm not gonna lie about it. But it was very clear to me too, the board wasn't working on kid issues. They were having adult issues, and adult issues are night and day different. So when you can make the conversation of the board about a kid or kids, I mean, obviously it needs to be about kids, then you can move the needle. And that was the OT side of me, because people were just trying to put like Band-Aids on things. And that's not going to work unless you get the base right. You got to get the base right, or you're not going to get, you got to get the base right. And so that's kind of how I ended up wanting to run for the chairs. I thought, well, we can do better if we are working for kids and if we're working with each other instead of against each other. And conflict's not my favorite thing. Then now I'm pretty darn good at it. I'm like, well, it doesn't. It just feels like a courageous conversation, a courageous interaction, instead of something like, oh, I don't want to hear what they're going to say. More now, it's like I want to hear what they're going to say, and I think it's made me better in the clinic. Because parents sometimes get upset because they don't think something's happening right with their kid, and I'm not always the treating therapist, but a lot of times when we get it, I can go and just with no emotional attachment to it, because it's not about me, right? And that's the one thing I've had to learn, and I wish I knew that better with my oldest son. It wasn't about me. So if I could have stopped my personal opinion about it and just really had a factual conversation and let that person have emotion. So it's made me a lot better as that, and I'm a much better mama to my 9-year-old. Much better.
Well, I think experience helps us and shapes us for sure. So I can see that's neat to hear how these things that were happening in your life in different performance areas
Yeah,
had helped you with this community leadership role. And then
absolutely.
how
Yeah.
that community leadership role has even helped you with your clinical role. So
Oh
that's
yeah. It's yeah.
that's
All day, like I feel like that I don't have segments of my life anymore. For a long time, I felt like I had, segmented out. It just wasn't ever really connected. Like compartmentalized is maybe a better word for it.
Mhm.
And Liz did a video just recently for me for my campaign, and it was that Paula has a heart for kids all day. She has a heart for kids at home, at her clinic, on the school board. And I thought, man, you know what? That's right. That's why life feels good right now. Is it's all day. It's different, but it's all day. Like I'm no longer compartmentalized. Every bit of energy I spend is moving towards helping kids have a better future. Like every bit I do, and that's pretty cool. I mean, that's talk about balance. That's pretty cool for OT.
Well, as you have advocated for different programs in the schools, how do you think your occupational therapy experience and your advocacy for mental health, what types of programs do you see that you've done in the past couple of years and that you'd like to do in the future relate to mental health and promoting that? Because I've noticed more OSDE trainings are happening. There's a big community-wide push for mental health awareness. And so I think the timing of this was amazing that we have an occupational therapist on the school board, but at the same time, statewide, OSDE is really trying to promote trust-based and trauma-informed and just mental health awareness, suicide awareness, everything. So
Yeah.
I think the timing's been really good, but let us know. I know a few things because I know you, programs that you have enacted since you first started on the school board. And then I know that you have some things that you'd like to do in the future.
Yeah.
What are those?
So, like, hands down, my favorite thing that has happened since I've been on the school board is Embrace OKC. And when I ran 4 years ago, I ran on a platform of bringing the conversation of mental health and wellness of our students and staff to the table, like just bringing it up. Wherever it goes, we got to start having the conversation. And then a couple other transparency, accountability, and some stability things. But mental health was a really big push 4 years ago for me. And luckily, one of the superintendents that I had right when we got on the board believed in that too. She was, 100% behind the trauma science and what that could have, how we could address that, how it would help kids access their learning brain. So in Oklahoma City, we have this thing called the Compact, and the Compact is a partnership between Oklahoma City Public Schools, Oklahoma City Public Schools Foundation, the City of Oklahoma City, the Greater Chamber of Commerce of Oklahoma City, and the United Way. And that forms the Compact, and that meets once a month. What happens is basically the CEO and the board chair, because all those entities have like the mayor and the city manager, something like that. So the top people meet once a month, and we come to the table, OKCPS does, with an issue that we want to address, but we're going to need community involvement to get it done. And so the one that people would know the most is Read OKC. That's been very successful, and that's been going on for a while. But Embrace OKC was the mental health initiative. And what we did was the Compact partnered with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse 3 years ago. And the chamber helped us to pay for an off-year Oklahoma needs assessment. So typically they're done every 2 years. The way our program went, we did an off year, and it only surveys 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, and a statistically, viable number of kids. We had 7,700 kids that took this assessment. Special ed, English language learners, second language learners. I mean, we had a good, the amount of kids and the diversity was adequate. So what it did was then the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse took that data and broke it down into feeder pattern. So feeder pattern, like if you're going to end up at Douglas High School or John Marshall or Grant or Southeast. And then we have feeder patterns from pre-K up. Now we have feeder patterns actually starting birth to 3. That's a whole other thing, but we have birth to 3 programs now in Oklahoma City. So this feeder pattern, and then they gave us evidence-based practices to put in starting in pre-K. Now we only assess these kids starting in 6th grade, but what we knew was the risk factors in 6th grade were creating preventable mental health problems, whether it be suicide or addictions or some forms of depression, anxieties. So we knew that when they get there, it's so hard to turn that corner. So she brought us back to pre-K. So now if, say, kids on the south side of town are more likely to drink alcohol than smoke marijuana, like just something like that, or more likely to have this happen to them and kids on the northwest side. So it's not a one-stop all. They took the time, broke it into feeder patterns, and gave us certain times to introduce certain programs that would create protective factors for these kids to help build resilience to offset the risk factors that we have no control of when they're not in our school. So that's Embrace OKC, and we are 2/3 of the way implemented. It's a $5 million project to get off the ground. It won't cost that $5 million every year, but to buy all the, to get all the training done for teachers and to buy all the software and just programs, it's $5 million. We're about 3.25 million into raising. We put our money in. OKCPS's participation is that, as we have one of the only mental health directors hired by Oklahoma City. Like we actually have a department that has a director that addresses this issue. Like we put that on the table. Then we, through P2G, we put counselors in every school, full-time counselors, not one day, not half a day, full-time counselors. And if they have over 500 kids or they're one of our transformational schools, they have more than one counselor all the time. But that's part of that Embrace compact. I mean, that's part of what that is. So we've done a resolution as a board that says once the 3 years of raising money to get this thing going, that we direct the superintendent in the district to always put Embrace OKC funding in the budget. Like we believe as a board that we have to continue to address the mental health and mental wellness of our kids and teachers. And so that's my favorite. Like that's it. So we've got work to do. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, but I will say hands down, we were the best position going into a pandemic because we already had a mental health program up and running. So our counselors have been working with kids across Zoom. They go to houses, they make phone calls. We doubled our social workers as part of this. So we were prepared. I mean, we were really ready to go, and we're prepared when kids come back with all the other things that happened while they were gone. So we're prepared for that too.
That's awesome. So I think that there are likely some people in our audience tonight that are thinking, maybe I could be on the school board too, or I've always wondered if I could do that. And then this is kind of the opportunity. If you have questions, you could put them in the comments below, and then we'll get these to Paula, and we'll be happy to post some responses after tonight.
Hey, let me say one more thing before about that. So one of the things you asked about being an OT, and the thing that helped me sitting in those meetings, and we have budget, so the district can't change the plan unless they come back to the compact. And being an OT, I've been able to say, well, I thought you said that program was for 9th and 10th graders. Why are we wanting to move it to 5th and 6th graders? Is there a different version of that? Because that's totally different developmental stages.
Right.
And so I've been able to kind of understand what they're saying, but also ask deeper questions because I understand development. So I just wanted to throw that little plug in there.
Well, and it makes sense because we do have a lot of that training, but we also have activity analysis training, and we also have this the OT research base. And so occupational therapy assistants and OTs are trained to analyze a problem and find a solution. So I think definitely if you're interested in doing community leadership roles, that don't sell yourself short or think you need to have an
Absolutely.
MBA or that you need to have legal experience, because there are different needs on a board, right? And so I
Yeah.
know that the skills we have in occupational therapy can be a definite plus to these decisions that need to be made with the school board. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were here tonight to talk about it, because community roles for occupational therapy is one of the areas that the OT Association wants to advocate. We know that managed care proposal coming in with OHCA and Medicaid expansion means life may get interesting for the clinic owners, the pediatric and people that see adults with disabilities. And so anybody that's working with OHCA is in for a ride this year
Yeah.
as we wait.
Exactly.
We don't know what's coming. And so to be prepared for something when we don't know the details yet can create some stress and anxiety. So using our therapeutic use of self and knowing how to expand into areas that we can get reimbursement for while we wait to find out what changes are happening,
Yeah.
a good
Absolutely.
plan.
I mean,
So
I really encourage an OT because you don't become a therapist, any therapist, honestly, unless you have a heart for people. Like you're generally a caregiver and you want to do good for people. Different viewpoints. There's not, no two therapists is alike, but I'll end with read a quote today. It was by Horace Mann, and we have a school named Horace Mann, which was kind of interesting. Is why I read it, and it said that doing nothing for others is the undoing of ourselves. And I can tell you that when I started giving service, myself became alive. But I just want to really encourage that whatever it is, whether it's when I laughed that I did, crossing guard duty on 22nd and Walker, wasn't just for my kid. Matter of fact, he didn't like it because he had to get up early to go with me. But just giving a little bit more of yourself. And I know, like, being busy, I get it. Like, I understand that we're all busy, but it's amazing if you, and not the first try doesn't always work. Like, I didn't land on really, being involved at AOTA. I tried for a while. That didn't ring home to me, and the school board did. But there's all kinds of boards and trust out there that we can bring a voice to. And one thing I've learned about being in this position is if you don't have a seat at the table, your voice isn't going to get heard. And if we want OT to grow and emerge into other areas, we've got to find tables to sit at. And we have to be patient and listen and hear and do our analysis before we try to give a quick answer, because it takes a long time to move the needle on things that have been stuck. But man, the work is so good. So yeah, doing nothing for others is the undoing of ourselves. That
that's a
one.
great quote. Thank you. I think occupational therapy providers tend to be givers and tend to help others before we advocate for ourselves. And so part of my time that I give to OKOTA in the board leadership is because I want to help others and I want to see the profession grow and thrive. And there are so many challenges right now.
Yeah.
So if we could recruit a few more people to help us on the board, it would just make the work a little bit lighter, but also bring in everybody's unique skills. I mean, like you said, not everybody's really cut out for maybe a particular role, but they try it and you learn from it and you decide if that's really where your calling is or of your passion. So as you have experiences going through golfing to to manual therapy to pediatrics to school board, I mean, that's quite a story. And I'm really glad that you shared your experiences with the audience tonight. And then hopefully we'll have another interesting guest on maybe next month. And
Yeah.
OKOT is looking at offering a free spring webinar for members.
Oh,
So
nice.
we have some good different topics to apply to different settings coming up this spring. So stay tuned and make sure you keep your membership active in the OT Association so you see what's happening at the Capitol, locally, all across the state. We're here to help and to move our profession forward despite all the challenges that we see. And thank you so much, Paula, for coming tonight and doing the interview with us on Facebook.
Well, thank you. And we're lucky to have you fighting for us for the state. You do a great job for us, Sarah. I appreciate that. Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right, everybody. Bye.